I want to talk about antennas today, specifically the linear types and whether they're good on these little quads. These are often coming now with these little linears instead of the circular polarized skews that we used to have, mostly because we keep smashing into them and squishing everything. But at the same time, we're tending to use skew planars on the goggles, and that's going to cause a loss of dB in the signal, so you're not doing it any favours. So I wanted to see today, and I'm holding this up because it's the one I'm going to use. This is the QAV 105 because it is equipped with a 25 milliwatt VTX with this little tiny dipole, but it's got a FreeSky XM Plus receiver, so it can at least go a decent distance. So I thought it'd be interesting to test that in various ways. So if I fly this about 300 meters around these twin trees in the field, using firstly this skew planar or one like it on my goggles, and then think about what happens if I use a rubber duck, because this is a linear polarized antenna. Surely that would be a match, although this is normally the thing you'd throw away when you get any sort of goggles or VTX. More excitingly, and the reason I wanted to do this test now, is because I just got this through the post. This is a linear patch, this prototype from a guy called Tommy D, who you might have heard of as also the guy that invented something called RSSI ProTrack, which is a tracker based on using the RSSI of various receivers to keep pointing helicals at you. So this linear patch prototype has a 10.3 dBi at 60 degrees, which is fairly wide and should work on the whole range of the 5.8 spectrum. And I also quite like this little printed wheel he's got on here. Sometimes when you're doing things on your goggles, you like turn, and getting it tight in the right place can be a bit tricky. So having this little wheel that goes on is quite good. He also just sent me one of his helicals to look at. This is a 5.5 turn, and this has got the same little thing, which I think is really good, because rather than having a pigtail, you can put that to your goggles, you can screw on using that quite happily and unscrew, and you don't have to sort of mess around getting in there and that. So quite impressive, and I look forward to doing the test. So yeah, let's get out there, let's take this and see what happens when we fly out. I'm hoping there'll at least be some drop off with my normal receiver when flying out that, because obviously I want to see some sort of difference between them so I can tell which one's best, else I'm going to have to find a new field which is longer or more trees or something like that. Anyway, let's go to the field. So off we go, and we're starting with the skew planar, and well, let's fast forward up to the point where it's going to get a little bit dodgy. So these are the twin trees about 300 meters away, and we get a little bit of breakup here on the skew, as you might expect, but otherwise, you know, a pretty good picture overall. You'd always expect something around trees, so I was pretty happy with this one. I also decided to do a couple of other things, so I thought I'd go through this little tree cut here just in case there was any problems going behind these trees. But of course it's autumn and most of the leaves have gone, so that really didn't present much of a problem. I also decided to have a quick fly behind myself. I wasn't expecting any problems on the skew or the rubber duck, but this is where the patch could be weaker, of course, because it's directional. It doesn't have any real reception at the back, so I wanted to see how that would look. On the skew, of course, not a problem at all. So let's move on to the rubber duck, and this is a great game trying to point to your own antenna whilst filming yourself. The reason I did that, of course, is not to particularly show you, but to work out which clip was for what. So the rubber duck, surprisingly, was much worse than the skew here. I expected this to be better in terms of it's linear to linear, and it seemed worse. Now I don't know if this is because the little rubber ducks are famously bad for multipathing, but there really wasn't that many hard objects to bounce off, just the tree. But behind those trees there and going behind yourself, it was about the same. A little bit worse. You get these funny little lines of weird interference on the rubber ducks. And this is me just illustrating that I can't just fly exactly the same route twice in a row. It would seem I have to do something different. This is really good fun trying to point to yourself. Anyway, on to the patch now. And I'm basically pointing my head in roughly the right direction. And it is noticeably quite a bit better. Hardly any breakup there through those trees. So that's pretty good. But again, we'd expect there to be a bit better. And going through these trees, it's about the same really. Not much happening.
So as expected, as we go behind ourselves here, we get this funny sort of interference pattern on the screen, which is to be expected. Don't go behind yourself with a patch. But I just wanted to see how it looked. So to do a better comparison, here's all three of them going through those trees, and you can just see how bad the rubber duck is. Skew does pretty well, the patch does slightly better. Not quite as pronounced as I thought. So I thought I'd move on to some trees in another field. I figured if I went down this path, the trees would kind of line up in such a way that the signal should get progressively worse as you sort of getting more trees in a way. So I flew this first with the skew, and there's some breakup as expected, but it did pretty well. So then I flew that in the reverse, and that was, I think, a little bit better because it's sort of the antenna's more in line with what we've got. And then I did a little bit of a tree weave, although a horrendously slow one and wide one for some reason, as I figured this was more sort of a real world thing of what you might be doing. And it was okay. There was some bad bits and some okay bits, but overall perfectly flyable. So out with the rubber duck, and we did the same route again. And once again, it's noticeably worse, much worse here than at the distance, almost to the point of thinking, ooh, am I going to make this all the way? Distance-wise, I think this is maybe 100 meters, probably less. It's just the trees in the way causing the issues. So the weave, not too bad, as we're coming sort of in and out, so we're getting a stronger signal and we're not getting too much where we're struggling to see. And finally the patch. Patch was quite interesting because it seemed to get some interference here, which a lot of the other antennas did, but in the bits where the others were worse, around here where it should be much worse, it got better, which I thought was interesting. It might just be that I'm lined up a lot better when I got to that bit than on the original bit. But yeah, pretty good through this, and so tree penetration, I'm thinking, well, this is probably quite good. And the weave, sort of samey, not too much. It makes it, more flyable. It gives you more confidence to do stuff, I guess, is the main point. And once again, let's look at a freeway comparison there to see how they perform. And you can just see how bad the rubber duck is. And the skew comes worse here, where the patch really comes through into its own in this part. Interesting.
Well, interesting because not the results I expected. I expected when you've got a little tiny linear like this that you match it with another linear and it would be good, but this was the worst. The skew did pretty well, much better than this, which didn't seem to make any sense to me. And as soon as you get the patch on, it gets even better, but of course you're in a limited angle and don't go behind yourself. So in conclusion, I say keep flying with a skew over this linear. But if you're going to do things like going in and out of trees and you're getting a bit more distance, then having a patch as well is quite a good idea. Now in this test I just used one antenna at a time, specifically to compare them against each other. But I wouldn't generally just put this on its own, I'd have it as part of a diversity system. In my goggles I'm using the little Relac. It is a diversity system, I just haven't got the other one in, as most of the time I just like to use it for the 40 channel receiver and the nice buttons that do stuff. But yeah, if you're going to use a patch, I suggest using a diversity system. They are fairly cheap now, and there's no need to have this dual one where you might want to break inside. There's plenty that do the dual antennas just there. But an interesting test all the same. Of course, I'm no expert on RF stuff, so if someone can tell me why this is worse than this when I was expecting this to be better, then, I'd appreciate it. But interesting all the same. Anyway, I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.